Welcome to the Strategic Management Accounting course, where we teach the value-adding steps and processes necessary to execute strategy. Whether you are just starting up or looking to grow your business, then this course is for you. With your host, Dr. Neil O'Connor.
One, two, three, start.
Hi, back again. Chapter 4, we're talking about results controls, people controls and cultural controls, but how can we make them tight and how can we stop the leakage in the organisation? Just this segment here, I'm just going to talk about how we can have tight results controls. Now, just to be specific, it's the results controls out of those three that depends most on good performance measurement. And there's a saying that you cannot manage what you can't see and you can't see what you can't measure, or the other way around. But there are a lot of sayings that revolve around those three things, being able to measure something, see something, and manage something. But measurement is a key component. And so what is great about this chapter 4 on the results control component is it first talks about what are the definitions of what we call to be desired results to be in place. Then we can think about what are the properties and measures that are needed for that. And so in the early part of chapter 4, they talk about the following definitions of desired results: congruence, specificity, communication, and completeness. And it's very easy to think, okay, they're all, how do we know when we've got one and we haven't got the other? Let's just get on to start measuring something. Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. We need to think about congruence, because congruence is about the alignment of what I'm doing as an employee in an organisation and how that's aligned with the overall organisation objective. Is what I do on a day-to-day contributing to the overall organisation objective? Is how I'm dealing with the customer the way the organisation's brand needs to be developed? And so it's in alignment with what I'm doing in my little particular place in the organisation with the overall goals of the organisation. We need to first think about alignment before we start thinking about measurement. What are we trying to align in what various positions, job descriptions, employees do from day to day, month to month, and year to year? Specificity. That's another aspect of defining a desired result. That is, how specific are the results that you want to try and measure? Do you want to measure general customer satisfaction, or do you want to measure a percentage of customers that are satisfied? That is, we may want to try and have a measure or a target that we don't want more than 2% of our customers to be dissatisfied with our service in any one year. And that's more specific than a general level of satisfaction that we might measure in a mean. So that's what we mean by specificity. So first of all, let's just remind ourselves what we're going through here. Congruence, that is alignment. Okay, being very clear about what the job description or what the actions you want employees to take are aligned with the overall organisation's goals. The second one is, how much detail do you actually want in that measurement? How much detail do you want in those results? Do you want percentage detail, or do you want a general descriptive detail? Look, both can work. It's just what you want for your organisation. A general detail of overall customer satisfaction can be good for developing a culture of awareness, a culture of awareness for that we need to serve the customer. It may not be particularly tied to a performance measure, and so that can be good for a people control, action control. But if we want to drive a tight results control, we might need to be a bit more specific about a certain percentage of customers that are complaining. And if it goes over that threshold, then we need to either penalise people involved or actually cut back on bonuses that are giving at the results end of the table. So there we have congruence, specificity. Two other aspects we need to consider with results controls: making them tight in defining the areas that we want results control over. Communication, and that's all about making sure that the people you want to communicate to are qualified and that you feel that you can get very good participation from them. No good getting participation from people that don't really care about communicating with you, and they just want to be focusing on the results. Okay, so controllability and reasonableness. Do the people that you're going to start to measure their results on, do they have control over those results? Now, here's another issue, and some organisations think about this a lot. Is it good to have 100% control over the results and feel that that's a good results control, or maybe 80% control? Some organisations, multinationals at the country manager level, they want to leave the country manager to have full responsibility, even though they may only have 50% control over the results in that country, because they want that manager to actually soak up that local information and actually share it back with the head office. So there are different things going on here about what you want communicated from the person that is under the results control. So controllability is all about how much risk you want to place on the person subject to that results control. Okay, if you give them a measure that they have full control over, then in some ways there's low risk that you're putting on that person. But if they only have 50% control over that measure, then they're taking a higher risk. You're actually putting more risk on that person. So controllability, we could say another word, instead of controllability, we could think about the notion of risk. How much risk do you want to put on the person subject to the results control? Reasonableness, this is very similar to controllability, but it's different. Reasonableness is associated with how tight or how achievable is that target that you're going to associate with that results measure. Are you going to make it achievable 80% of the time, or maybe 20% of the time? They're totally different things. That's not to say that they cannot control the results. It's just that you're really focusing on how much effort you want employees to put in. Do you want to make them to put in a back-breaking effort, or do you want them to be happy and comfortable? So that's what we mean by reasonableness here. It's different from controllability. Controllability is how much control employees have over their final result. Do they have full control or complete control? You could compare a basic manufacturing assembly line worker as having sort of full control over the actions that they take, where compare that to a country manager of a multinational where they may not have full control, but you still make them have full responsibility for targets that are set in that country. So controllability and reasonableness, they're sort of two dimensions, and in some ways both of them can put more or less risk on the people you are making subject to results control. Let's go down to the final part of the four, because we've covered congruence, specificity, communication, it's how you communicate the desired results, and the completeness. But let's get one fact straight. It's really difficult to have complete measures over everything. It really is. At a reasonable cost. Like, you can pay lots and lots of money and get complete measures over everything. And you find as an organisation you're actually spending all your time controlling, all your time measuring, and not actually producing or adding value to the customer, which is really the real strategy of most organisations. So it's hard to measure everything. So you've got to make trade-offs. And that's where the cost of measurement comes into being. So let's just review these four items of desired result areas that we're trying to focus on. We want to make sure there's congruence. We want to have a level of detail. The more detail we have, then in some ways it can help us make things more controllable or more reasonable. Communication is very important, and that's where you need to consider the qualifications of the employees subject to this control, and that can affect the risks that you put on them. So managers, you can put more risk on, versus an assembly line employee, you put less risk on them. And whether they participate in actually setting the reasonableness of the targets may depend on how much information they have, how much information you want them to share to you. And so participation may be much more important higher up in the organisation rather than lower down in the organisation, because higher up in the organisation they may be they get access to information that the CEO, other senior managers do not get access to on day-to-day operations. So having this determine the definitions of desired results control, congruence, specificity, communication, and completeness. There are many dimensions there. We can then think about going to measure what we want to measure. And we did cover the basic stamp process, and this is the O'Connor reshuffle of what consultants like to refer to as under another version called SMART. I call it STAMP because I'm actually taken 3 of those items from the SMART, probably the 4th one, but given it another name, I call it Precision, and I'm adding in this notion of specificity. And what I wanted to relay to most participants is to focus most on the precision and specificity, because in some ways this is what measures have or do not have. Once you've set a measure, you can vary the timeliness. It's possible you can vary the achievability by setting different targets. And whether it's measurable, well, that will depend in many ways on how much congruence you want and how much specificity you want here, and also the completeness. So it's how you define the results domain will determine whether you can measure something or not. So let's go on to how these two fit into this target area. And now we have specificity and precision. And what I wanted to, the big point I want to take away in this area here is that if I want to measure how someone is selling to customers, I might use a customer survey. And that customer survey in some ways may not be that precise because, well, there could be subjectivity involved. It could be how I've actually influenced the customer during the filling out of the survey. Like some companies, employers have actually asked customers to come in, give them a cup of tea, make them feel well, and they go to the extent of actually filling out a survey for the customer. You know, lots of that gamesmanship going on there. But even gamesmanship aside, customers are not always the best judges of how much value that they've been given by the company. And so there's going to be some variance there. And so the precision of a customer survey in some ways may be quite low. We may compare that with sales transaction from customers over a 6-month, 12-month period, where we can find that the accounting measure of those sales, the precision is very, very high. And so this is the notion of precision that we're trying to get at with a measure. Do you want high precision or low precision? And what I want to emphasize is that we probably want both. We want some measures that have very high precision that will take us to bring in all these measures closer together rather than far apart. Okay? And we want low precision, but in some ways we want measures that are very high on specificity over here. And what do we mean by that, specificity? A customer survey may give us a greater sense of whether that customer is going to come back, whether that customer will refer their experience, a good one, to their relative or to somewhere else, to someone else. So it's kind of word of mouth. A sales transaction cannot tell you this specific information. Hotels use these type of surveys often. 2 main questions that a lot of chains use are to what is the extent of the likelihood when you're in our area, will you come and use our hotel again? And the other question is, what is the extent that you'll refer our good services that you received, recommend that to one of your friends, relative, or to someone else in your own company? And so based on those 2 questions, hotels use that to some extent to actually reward managers in hotels and the customer service staff. So you can see that the way customers respond to these surveys is going to be quite everywhere, all over the place. And in some ways it's not very precise, very low on precision. But in some ways it's very high in specificity, because some academics have found that measures of customer whether customers will come back and the likelihood that they'll recommend that hotel to someone else, they have found that to be lead indicators of future accounting sales. That is, future returns. And so, in some ways, we're trying to link a really good specific measure, customer survey, to a really good precise measure, that is, an accounting measure of the sales, to get to that perfect bullseye here. That is a very accurate measure. It's very specific and very precise. And that's the Holy Grail. And it's very hard to achieve this point here with one measure alone. Accounting is very good at taking us across to this domain here. Okay? Non-accounting measures like customer survey measures are very good at taking us here. And so the Holy Grail is, how can we get to here with a measure? Well, we can't, but it's possible to get to there with a package of measures. For example, a precise measure and an imprecise measure, but a specific measure. And the way that we do it is that over time, some firms are doing this. That is, they're gathering data on their customer surveys and tracking that data over time to see if it's related to future performance of the organisation. That is, they're trying to see if there's a statistical relationship to this measure here. So therefore, now we've got a measure that we can believe in because it's related to a precise measure here, and now we have a measure that we can influence in the future, by the way, because we know that that's affected by customer satisfaction. So it's dealing with employee beliefs in the measure and the feeling of influence in the measure are two big things that we're trying to achieve with this Holy Grail of precision and specificity. Let me repeat, the problem with accounting measures is that employees can't always feel, if they're not on the sales boundary of the organisation, they can't always feel that they can influence sales in the organisation. Maybe simple things about how they're delivering meals to tenants in the hotel, or how they're working on the factory line. How can they feel that that's related to sales of the product? Well, if they made a very good quality product and the customers are happy with that, then that may be linked with future sales. They may feel that their actions in the organisation are closely related to how customers are received by that organisation, how customers are actually perceive their value that they're getting from the employee through filling out the customer satisfaction survey. So employees can, in some ways, from a specific measure, can feel that they have an influence on this measure here, but they may not believe it. But the way that we can get them to believe this type of measure is statistically link that measure over time through statistical longitudinal data analysis with future accounting performance measures, which we do believe in. And so once we've got that connection, then we've got that perfect Holy Grail connected. So going back what we've done here, we've looked at the definitions of desired results controls. These are specific definitions of the measurement properties. These are measurement properties. And what I've shown here are two key measurement properties that could be useful in actually setting up or thinking about. If you're only to put in one or two measures in the organisation, I would suggest you think of putting a measure in this area here and to track over time to see if it's related to the accounting measure down here. Right, so there you have it. Definitions of desired results areas, and now we have the specific performance measurement properties. Once we've worked out what areas that we want to measure, then we can think about the measures that we want to have in that organisation. And these are properties of measures that will make or break the actual results control. Okay? We need to have specific and we need to have precise, but very few measures are both specific and precise. And in another session I can talk about timeliness, achievability and measurability. So thank you for that, and we'll just stop there.